Good morning and what's going on, everybody? Welcome to the Canadian Football Fanatics podcast. Blake and I coming at you once again for a BC Lions preview. Blake, oh boy, do we have a big one tomorrow, and I'm excited to talk about it, buddy. So let's get into it. First things first, how are you doing? And thanks for joining me.
Yeah, I'm doing good. It's been a good weekend of CFL football so far. Both games going into this morning, and when we release this, going down to the wire. A couple crazy endings, and like you said, I don't know, Cole. Is there really anything to talk about that's happened with the Lions this week? It doesn't feel like it. So
I don't think there was any big news or anything like
no,
that.
no, yeah,
All jokes aside, but let's get into it. Like I mentioned, excited for this one. We've lucked out, if that's what you want to call it, for the first two games of going in our way in
yep,
terms of Western Division opponents. Saskatchewan, you know, falling last night. I couldn't believe Montreal was able to pull it off. It looked like that Saskatchewan was maybe going to run away with it at times, and they just couldn't pull away. And then literally, Montreal finds a way to win by 3 points and hand Saskatchewan. I believe their fourth loss in a row. And BC's right there with them. I believe has lost three straight, but very confident they can right the wrongs of the last few weeks and get a W tomorrow. So this is not a CFL show. This is a BC Lions preview. So let's get into our Lions, Blake. Um, you know, Falling to 5-4 now in the season with Winnipeg at 3-6. This is a big game for us. To I believe with a win the season series,
yep.
um, and then we would also take a pretty significant point lead for any sort of playoff implications down the line if the Bombers were to try to catch us. I don't think that's possible, but to be honest with ourselves, like we look down here at both of our records, right? The Bombers get a win tomorrow, hand the Lions a loss, getting them to 5-5. The Bombers are a win away and have the season series in their favor. So we have to be honest with ourselves. And I think as confident as I am, Winnipeg is on some sort of a high right now, if that's what you want to call it. So excited to see how the Lions handle it, and especially being at home, I think that should be in our favor to feel the crowd, feel the momentum. Obviously, like we talked about Nathan Rourke a few times this week returning, I would imagine that the upper bowl will be I don't want to say well sold, but there'll be some fans up there, and then the lower
Mhm.
expect to be close to sold out as well. So should be a pretty good atmosphere. The Bombers have obviously been our rivals here the last few years, but Blake, what are your kind of initial thoughts here going into the matchup tomorrow?
Yeah, I think it's a really good matchup for the Lions. They're going to be pissed off because it's not that anyone's forgotten, fans or players alike, but before that Elks game, it was the Bombers that shut out the Lions 25-0. And as you mentioned, they're coming in on a bit of a high. I believe they started 0-5, if I have that correct, Cole. They've won three of their last four. All of a sudden, they're up to 3-6, and as you mentioned as well, if they can win tomorrow, not only are they a game behind the Lions in the standings, but they also win the season series. So, kind of that first place in the Western Division, even maybe, just maybe that home playoff game that the Lions have kind of come accustomed to for the last two seasons in the Western Division semifinal is hanging in the balance. So, it's a huge game at the midway point of the season. With Nathan Rourke coming back, I know I saw a couple of tweets from our boy Farhan Lalji that said on his Wednesday practice that he had only seen him miss one pass all practice. So I think Nathan is not going to be rusty at all, as we talked about on the weekly show and on the kind of impromptu show that we did when Nathan signed. Nathan has been ramping up for the past month or so. So I don't really expect any rust. I expect him to be ready for game action. The depth chart came out earlier this morning. The Lions had already announced it yesterday, but they kind of made it officially official with naming him the starter. Chase Bryce will be the backup. And then, of course, VA, just paper wise, if worst case scenario were to happen, he'll be the third stringer. So Nathan gets the start tomorrow. But the Bombers are also getting a little bit healthier. Kenny Lawler is making his return. Zach Claros, he hasn't had a great season, but you never know. Maybe tomorrow afternoon will be the day that he breaks out and finally throws for more than one touchdown pass in a game.
Let's hope not, Blake. Let's hope maybe it's a next week thing for Zach Collaros. But well said, buddy. Honestly, and we're talking about obviously being a BC Lions fans here, being a BC Lions preview, talking about the Bombers catching us. They'd be nipping on the heels of the Saskatchewan Roughriders as well.
Yep.
Would start to really muddy things up when it comes to who's going to finish. 1 through 3 in the West. And then that kind of opens up the door for some of those teams in that fourth seed to maybe look at still being in contention with Edmonton, kind of coming hot today. I believe they play today at 4 o'clock, if I'm
Yep.
mistaken. So I'm interested to see how that one goes, right? Versus Hamilton, a very winnable game. I believe
No
it's
Trey Ford though.
no Trey Ford, but MVT. I believe we've kind of talked about on the weekly show, right? Hasn't had a bad season by any means. It's just he hasn't done enough to win, and that's why I feel like we've kind of wanted to see Trey Ford, to see him electrify the team and do those plays that can generate some wins, which we've seen here from the Elks the last few weeks. So MBT, I think we saw, a so-so game. I wouldn't say it was a great game by any means last week, but he came in, did his job, executed when he needed to, and ultimately got the Elks a win. I think he could do the same thing against a Hamilton team. So say they win, I believe they get to 3 wins on the season. They're only a game back of Winnipeg there, so things just start to get really muddy here, and would definitely from a Canadian football standpoint make things interesting for us on the weekly show. A lot of storylines, stuff like that. But as Lions fans, things might be getting a little bit tight, which I don't know how great I feel about that. So let's get into it, Blake. As you mentioned about the injuries, just before we went live here, I was able to go get the Lions injury report, and a little bit banged up than had to be expected. Obviously, last week we lost some linebackers, so knowing that I think we were going to be, there was some rumblings that they were possibly going to be, a week to week, maybe that they're going to be ready for this week, but I think I don't believe, if sorry if I'm not mistaken, Blake, I didn't see either, but none of them were placed on the 6 game injured, if I'm not mistaken. Correct?
Not that I saw. I do know that friend of the show, someone that we met up in Kamloops, Christophe Beaulieu, is
Yeah.
out for this game with I believe an ankle injury. Um,
Yeah.
and
So
I and I
I'll
want
get
to
into the.
say,
Go ahead,
sorry,
Blake. Yeah.
Cole. No, I want to say
Okay.
that I think Pete Robertson was also ruled out, if I have that correctly. And then I
Yeah. So
think,
I
yeah,
got the
sorry,
injury
go ahead.
report. I got the injury report here, Blake. So, starting with VA, who hasn't practiced yet, but I believe he is, like you mentioned, he is listed as a third string quarterback. So, I would think in an emergency situation, he would be ready to go. Probably more so just precautionary, not wanting to force him to practice with, Nathan wanting to get a majority of the reps. And then, you'd probably want Chase Bryce to get some
Hmm.
reps in there as well to, get some chemistry. God forbid anything does happen, right? Bryce has kind of been running with the third team and not really, I would figure, getting much reps. So, you'd probably want to get them 2 reps, keep being nice and healthy. I would still think he's doing his, his bike work, his conditioning off to the side and stuff like that at practice to make sure that he is ready in case of, break glass in case of emergency, which let's cross our fingers that that doesn't have to happen. So VA was a DNP both days, Wednesdays, Thursday. I would imagine yesterday as well with that knee
He
injury.
was.
Christophe Beaulieu, like you mentioned, the ankle injury has been a DNP and has been ruled out. Ben Haladic was the calf injury, has been a DNP and is ruled out as well. Alex Hollins, I actually, maybe I should go to Twitter quickly. The screenshot I have is it cut off the last day.
Hollins is on the depth chart. I did see that.
Okay, well, he was a DNP, so let me just quickly pull it up to see. Good podcasting here. um, but Alex Hollins with a knee as well. DNP, then a full, so he is available. And I guess it does say here, but I guess games. Let me go to the quickly. So I guess Haladic is a possibility. He is listed on the depth chart as well as listed as questionable. So I would wonder what's going on there, and I would imagine some sort of calf strain. But to continue down, um, TJ Lee was on the injury report, but it's listed as a personal here. David Mackey, DNP a couple days, but a hamstring, and he's questionable as well. Justin McInnes has been dealing with an abductor injury. I believe that's kind of your abdomen area. He is a DNP and then a full, so he's available as well. Um, Andrew Pearson, unfortunately, has been a healthy scratch now with Chris Slugger kind of going into that six lineman extra role with Mike Couture coming back. Gary Peters is available as well. He was dealing with a little bit of an ankle injury earlier in the week. And then, as you mentioned, Pete Robertson with a foot injury, DNP the first 2 days limited, and his status is questionable as well. Um, so
Looks like
interested.
Coach, sorry, Cole. Looks like Coach Campbell is playing games from the Mike O'Shea School of Coaching with all those questionables.
I like it. I like it. You shouldn't lead on anyways, but to go to the depth chart here, obviously Ace Ely is listed as the starter over Ben Hladic, so I would imagine same sort of situation as
Mhm.
VA that he's probably ready to go, but more so precautionary. Let's not rush him out there. Being that it's middle of August, there's still a long way to go here. Let's try to make sure that Ben Hladdic's not put in any dangerous situations where he has to maybe tear his calf, and then it's a month long situation more so than just a week to week. So Bo Lacumbo as well is on the depth roster as well, but not listed as the starter. That's Ryder Varga this week as well, who stepped in to the lineup as well last week. A guy that I've been a big fan of going back to when the Lions drafted, I believe, in 2022. He went back to school in 2023, the University of Regina. And then this is, I believe, his first or maybe his second full year with the team now. And I could be mistaking my years there. But, a Canadian kid who's kind of stepping into this role. Excited to see what he's able to do. I know last week was a tough one for in terms of, missed assignments, missed tackles. The Edmonton Elks ground game was able to be pretty effective against us last week. So for a younger player still, I think his head was maybe a little bit spinning last week, and I'm excited to see, once he's maybe a little bit more comfortable in there, if he's able to make some plays alongside Ace Ely. And then at safety, Patrice Rene is going to step in for Christophe Boyu, who Patrice Rene obviously had to go to the bench last week, but has been playing, very well all season, Blake. I
Yep.
think we've been very quick to talk about him on the show quite a bit, the post game show stuff like that, playing that Sam linebacker, a little bit of half as well. And I know he's been taking in some reps at safety going back to training camp as well. So excited to see him step into that role. But bummed for our guy obviously going back to training camp once again, Christophe Boyu, who we've been high on and kind of hoping to see. And I think he's been doing his job out there. Not too many flash plays, but when his numbers called upon, I know you talked about and pointed out the tackle on Brady Oliveira 2 weeks ago, if I'm not mistaken, would have been a touchdown for the Bombers, and if he wasn't able to get down Brady in the open field. So I think he's been doing his job quietly, and bummer for him to get taken out of the starting lineup due to an injury. Adrian Green's going to take over at the halfback position, as he has been in the past few weeks here, moving over from safety. And then once again, the secondary will look the same with Keontae Evans, TJ Lee, and Gary Peters. Up front, looks like Thibaut Tobias is actually going to get the start at defensive tackle, and Christian Covington's going to move into that reserve role. Now, whether or not that's more so a uh, with the ratio type stuff, not wanting to have to start another Canadian, whatever it may be, I would imagine Christian Covington's still going to get a decent amount of snaps behind Josh Banks, whether they rotate them, whether you see both Josh Banks and Christian Covington out there. I definitely keep an eye on that as well. So other than that, Sione Tama, Pete Robertson on the outside. Injuries for the Bombers. Like Blake said, they're actually getting pretty healthy right now. Other than Dalton Schoen, who we know has been out for the season. I believe they're starting to get some guys back. I know Celestin Haba. I don't know if he's quite back yet, but there's been some banter that he could potentially be returning here soon. Lucky Whitehead obviously was a nice addition for them, especially against the BC Lions. But I believe he's been taken out of the starting lineup for Kenny Lawler, and he'll be a special teams weapon. I think is their plan to use him returning kicks and stuff like that. So as we know, right, maybe not as good as he did in his prime, but Lucky Whitehead's a threat when the ball's in his hands for sure. So maybe they're hoping for some sort of electricity there. And then once again, playing his former team, the BC Lions, I would think there's going to be some juice from Lucky, very much motivated to make some plays against his former teammates, stuff like that. So, interested to see, man. Kenny Lawler coming back is going to be a big time addition for them, being able to, take some attention away from the defense, open up guys like Ontario Wilson, stuff like that. And then hopefully, Nick Dembski's not able to fumble away anything. If you're a Bombers fan, fumble away all their hard work towards the end of the game. So I think, the Bombers are getting healthy at the right time. But Blake, is there anything from a Lions perspective that injury wise maybe concerns you a little bit?
Yeah, I think we talked about it just a minute ago. Kind of a couple injuries. I had looked at the injury report. I'd forgotten. I think Ben Hladic has been dealing with that injury. I believe you said it was a calf injury, correct, Cole? Yeah, he's been dealing with that for a few weeks now. And it's unfortunate that he'll have to slide into the reserve role, as I think by far he's been the Lions' best linebacker this year. And then on the defensive line, if you will, Pete Robertson's injury as well concerns me, as we've talked kind of, it seems like, at nauseum about the defensive line and how they're not getting to the quarterback enough so far this year. But it seems to be the one guy that was getting to the quarterback, getting some pressures, was Pete Robertson. So if he's out of the lineup, you already mentioned that Christian Covington, who's been almost non-existent, if you will. I think he's had 2 sacks maybe this year. One was a garbage time sack against the Stampeders in the home opener, and I believe there was another one maybe against the Riders that I'm drawing a blank on. But he's been almost non-existent. So if those two aren't in the starting lineup, where's the pressure going to come from the BC Lions and their D line?
Yeah, I'm interested. I think it's time for Sione Tama to make a more of an impact on the game. I know he's been active out there. You usually see him; he's a flashy type player, but not enough finishing type plays, right? Getting the guy to the ground. I know early on the season we had seen quite a few tackles for loss in the run game and stuff like that, which has been nice to see, where he's in the backfield getting the running backs on the ground before they even get to the line of scrimmage, but just not enough finish. And maybe you know Shane was, quick to, remind us that we are third in the league in sacks. Maybe on our part, it's a little bit spoiled from, what we've been accustomed to the
Hmm.
last few seasons. Like I mentioned, with missing 18 sacks from David Menard, Matthew Betts, and then David Menard having double-digit sacks as
Yeah,
well.
10.
So maybe we're a little bit spoiled from previous years, and hopefully, they can just add some sacks at key times down the stretch here because at the end of the day, that's all that matters. If they can get some sacks and get guys on the ground come September, October, and into November, I'm sure we're going to be pretty happy and very satisfied with how they perform. So, like we've been, we both said, we both been very disappointed in Christian Covington's season so far, but still has a lot of time here now down the back half of the season to hopefully now there's no more excuses to you have to be settled into the game by now. The playbook you shouldn't be thinking too much about your responsibilities and in the playbook and stuff like that. You should have had plenty of time to study and stuff like that. Get up to speed with the playbook stuff like that. I know the yard off the ball is maybe a little bit of a different thing for you to deal with, considering he's never had to do that. BC is the only high school that runs American football, right, in their
Hmm.
structure. So not ever having Canadian football, I understand the few weeks to get adjusted, but it's been 11 weeks, 10 games now where he's had the time to get adjusted. So from here on out, for me, no more excuses. I think we've kind of been pretty nice about it, right? Where we've
Yep.
said things here and there and been, critical of him and said, we'd like to see things from him now. But now it's like, okay, it's time to cash in on what your name brings to this roster and stuff like that. So hoping for a big, second half of the season from Christian Covington, because even if he's able to get, 6 or 7, 8 sacks in his first year, I think that's probably a plus, Blake, if we really take a step back from it, right? 8 sacks in 18 games for his first season as a defensive tackle, too, a guy that's not on the edge. I think we could find some positives in that season, and hopefully he's able to get even better going into his second and third year. As I remind you, right, he is still a younger guy, right? I believe he just entered his 30-year-old season, if I'm not mistaken.
I think so,
Um,
yeah.
so hopefully he still has a few more years of some good football left for the Lions and is able to continue like this on an upward trajectory. So Blake talked about the injuries. I guess let's get into the matchup of this game then. Hey, let's get into let's start with RBC Lions here, buddy. We talked about it all week. We've seen now that he's going to get the start. What are your thoughts and what's your confidence level in Nathan Rourke leading the Lions this week offensively?
Yeah, I mean, it's not a secret. We even talked about it when we did the show after he's signed, that I wasn't um, super pleased. Maybe that's not the right word. I wasn't ecstatic about the signing. Let's put it that way, because I loved Nathan when he was here, but at the same time, he left. He went to the NFL, and there's no disrespect for that. But it's like he went and tried to chase his dream in the NFL, and it didn't work out. And VA came here, and VA lit it up. So it was, and we talked about it when he was even disconnected or cut, pardon me, from the Giants. We talked about whether that was it, whether he was going to come to the CFL, who was going to sign him, what would be the best fit. And we even talked then that it wouldn't have been the Lions that were the best fit for him, But ultimately, the Lions did sign him. I have the utmost faith in Nathan Rourke that he's going to be able to perform here this upcoming Sunday. He's going to make a lot of great throws. He's going to get guys like Hollins and Hatcher and McInnes involved. And I feel like the Bombers defense, Bombers fans, they've been tweeting out the picture of the West Final after the Lions lost. Brian Burnham and Nathan Rourke kind of crying in each other's arms after that game. And after that, Nathan left for the NFL. So Nathan's going to have a chip on his shoulder. Nathan has yet to beat the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And frankly, that one time that he played him in BC Place, he got embarrassed. The Lions lost by like 20 some odd points. He was the new kid on the block. He was the one that everyone was talking about. Nathan Rourke, Kid Canada, as Canadian quarterback. He's so great. And I believe those were two undefeated teams as well going into that game. And then the Bombers walked into BC Place. And again, for a lack of a better word, they embarrassed Nathan Rourke and the BC Lions. So I think he's going to be extremely motivated to quote unquote shut up the haters and finally get that first win over the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Well said, buddy. I apologize for my quick absence there, but the laptop was dying very quickly, and I realized the charger wasn't in here, so I appreciate you holding it down. But well said from what I was able to listen to there. From my standpoint, from Nathan Rourke, very confident in him and being able to somewhat pick up where he left off. Was on a it's a tough balance of these on pace numbers because it's a long year, right? You're gonna have bad games in there, so I know people were very high on the on pace for VA this year, Justin McInnes, etc. In 2022, if we go back to Nathan Rourke's start, there was everybody who was, Nathan Rourke's on pace for this and that, and then injuries happen, stuff like that. It's unfortunate. We've seen it with VA now too with injuries, right? He was on pace for 6,000 yards at one point and stuff like that. Where I don't expect Nathan Rourke to have too much of a struggle getting accustomed to the Canadian game. Now, where I maybe am hesitant on his start is a fast start from the offense is maybe it takes him some time to slow down in his mind of thinking a little bit too much in terms of trying to relearn the playbook. I would imagine he's going to be grinding this week at practice and then after practice to try to. He mentioned in his press availability it won't be more so kind of learning the playbook, but it'll be forgetting the other schemes he's learned. He was quick to mention as well, this is four schemes he's learned in a year now, dating back to Jacksonville, New England, the Giants, and Atlanta, right? So a lot of different things where the verbiage could be, the same, right? Where, say the Lion is a pass play for the Giants. It could be a run play for the Lions, right? So maybe some of those things I think he could be, a little bit slow, and maybe the Lions don't
Mhm.
come out as fast, right? But I expect him to get up to speed. You mentioned about Farhan Lalji reporting that he was looking very comfortable in practice. Only one ball was incomplete so far. Where also I'm curious to see is I believe other than Hatch and Katoy, he didn't really do too much throwing to Alex Hollins. If I'm not mistaken, Alex Hollins was on the PR in
I
2022 more
think
so than
so.
the active roster up until I believe the end of the season. I believe he maybe got into the active roster but wasn't a starter in the playoffs. And that's where there was kind of some rumblings that the team was high on this Alex Hollins practice roster type guy. I don't believe it was until that next year that Alex Hollins was given that
Mhm.
bigger role into the offense. So you look at the receivers here from left to right. You have Alex Hollins starting, Keon Hatcher in his position, Javon Katoy back into the starting lineup. Justin McInnes and Aiden Eberhardt. Aiden Eberhardt, Justin McInnes obviously weren't on the team in 2022.
Mhm.
Both great players and good players who have been having good seasons so far, but maybe does it take them a little bit of time to get up to speed, their chemistry, Nathan kind of reading their body language, understanding how quick they're in and out of cuts and stuff like that, etc. Um, Now, where I think Nathan is outstanding is that he's not going to pick favorites, right? He's not going to say, "Oh, I only played with Keon Hatcher and Javon Katoy. I'm going to only go there," right? Knowing Nathan Rourke the way I do, I would imagine he's going to spread the ball all over all over the field the way he likes to do, and I think that's when he's going to maybe settle into the game and maybe take off, after the first quarter, stuff like that. I'm pretty prepared for a little bit of a slower first quarter. Maybe it's a few 2-and-out stuff like that. But once he gets settled in, I think I would expect a 300-yard game and a few touchdowns from Nathan for sure. So excited to see Nathan and what he's able to do back in the Lions jersey. This has all happened so fast. It's honestly a little surreal that now we're pretty close to game day here, and 12 is going to be back under center for us. And I guess just lastly, as we're kind of talking about the quarterback here, man, we've mentioned it all week, and you mentioned it firstly too, is just tip my cap to VA, man, and I feel for him. Nathan also mentioned and Farhan being there at the media availability this week that VA has been the ultimate pro, and it's just very easily you couldn't fault him if he wanted to feel some type of way and um be public about it. He has every right to feel that way because of the situation he is, and it's a credit to the human being he is for how he's handled the situation. And kind of I would imagine, like I said, I'm very curious to see the silent interactions, but I would imagine he's going to be the first guy on the sideline with an iPad for Nathan and kind of giving his advice on what he's seeing and stuff like that. So just a credit to VA, man, and just I've grown a little bit more love, if you will, if that's what you want to call it, for him, and just the person that he is off the field, right?
Yeah.
I'll always be a VA fan from now on, and just always root him on and hope he is in a good situation, and hopefully we're able to put him in that situation going forward. So just lastly on VA, just wanted to give him a shout out here because he's handled this very well, and we're going to need him down the stretch. You never know what, like I said, God forbid something happens. Maybe VA has to lead us to that Grey Cup. So and we're not going to need him. We're going to need him in those other roles that I mentioned of giving Nathan some advice, stuff like that. So I guess let's get to more about the offense here. I think we need to see some more from the offensive line here this week when it comes to you know, giving Stanback some lanes. There were some nice lanes there early on
Yep.
in the game last week, but I think they need to have themselves that where they were kind of in that stretch from week 2 to, I would say, maybe week 7, where they were opening up enough run lanes for the running back to get some productive yards, and then giving VA enough time to at that time we were the hottest thing on turf, man. Like we were slinging the ball around the field. And I think Nathan's ability to get the ball out fast will help that, but I think this is the unit that is going to hold us back from our ultimate goal of winning a Grey Cup. If they're not able to open up the lanes that Stanback needs, and then give the quarterbacks time to find the receivers downfield and pass the ball, we have enough weapons. We have a running back now that can get the hard yards come playoff time and stuff like that. We have a quarterback who can spread the ball. We have two quarterbacks that can spread the ball around at an MOP rate. A defense who is slowly, I think, getting up to speed, but a defense that can hold us in games. Like as bad as they've played this year, and both of us have been critical of them. They've held us in a lot of these games, right? Edmonton last week, if I remind people, I believe it was 19-6 in the fourth quarter.
19 to
Flanco,
16. Yep.
yeah, sorry, 19-16. Flanco runs into the punter. The Edmonton Elks get an extra possession. They score a touchdown. It's 26-16 after that 10-point game, I believe. And then they obviously get the garbage time touchdown there late to make it 34-16, or 33-16, excuse me, to make it the final. It looks a lot farther than it was. But like I remind you, it was a 3-point game in the fourth quarter where the defense did enough to hold them in the game with a backup quarterback. We go back to Winnipeg. They were on the field for 40 minutes and only allowed a 25-0. They did enough to let that offense to score. They haven't played well enough. I agree, right? But if you're telling me that they can hold teams under 30 points, I believe our offense is good enough to score 30 points in playoff games, right? Especially
Absolutely.
home field advantage, Blake, is what we're playing for, right? There's no elements in BC place. We are able to have our offense at as high powered as possible, right? In playoff situations. So, it's a different story going to Saskatchewan, going to Calgary, going to Winnipeg in the playoffs, right? As we know, the last few years when weather starts to slow down our offense and what we are good at, right? Passing the ball. If it's in BC place, we should be scoring 30 points a game. And if our defense is able to do their job and score and hold them within under 25 points, yes, it's going to be close games, but they're doing their job, right? They're knowing that their offense has their back and just has to do enough, right? So, what are your thoughts on the offensive line, buddy, here of the last few weeks, and how do you think they can get better? I guess.
Yeah, I don't think the offensive line has performed well enough. I agree with you. Although I will admit that last week I don't think it was on the offensive line. We saw that Stanback rushed for around 80 yards, which is around the CFL average.
Yep,
And and then on the other side, they gave Dolagala enough time. Who again, we don't have to rehash that, but it really is unfortunate the business. He's a starter one week, he's no longer on the roster now the next week. But they gave Dolegala enough time, and I think there was multiple times, like at least four or five, where Dolegala simply just overthrew his receiver. Like he put too much underneath it, and it wasn't even close. But I do agree that especially with Nathan coming back, maybe he's gonna have a little bit of happy feet, not really seeing any meaningful game action. I mean, I don't want to take any disrespect off the NFL in their preseason, but he hasn't played a regular season game since 2022. So maybe if he starts to feel that pressure early on, he's gonna try and escape the pocket and run as we know that he can. So I think the offensive line, if they can give Nathan, 3, 4, heck, if they can give him 5 seconds of good, clean pocket, Nathan is going to absolutely tear up that Winnipeg defense.
absolutely, buddy. Well said. So last in the offense here, receivers. I think it's time for firstly, Justin McInnis, Alex Hollins to get back on track, number one. And then I think it's time for Keon Hatcher to, establish himself now, to remind people, number one, he is one of the best receivers, if not the best receiver in the CFL. And why he's so elite? Because, first few weeks getting back up to speed, he's been, utilizing the offense. He's been definitely getting targeted, but VA going down, I feel like he's not been able to be as effective. Like you mentioned, uh, Dolegala missing some receivers, just not being the type of guy, that type of quarterback that VA is, or Nathan Rourke, which is no slight at Jake Dolegala. Those are two
No.
elite guys. Um, but it's time, I think, for me. Justin McInnis to get back on his pace. I know that I just kind of contradict myself with the pace thing, but to get back on the tear that he was basically, and then Alex Hollins was the same thing. If I remind folks, I believe it was week 3, the 215-yard game against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. Where he was going off, right? So I think it's time for those guys to get back on track. Keon Hatcher to establish himself once again as one of the best receivers in the CFL. And then, as I remind you guys, Javon Catoy and Aiden Eberhard might be the best 4 and 5 receivers in the CFL, if we're being honest, right? Two guys that are Javon Catoy, I said going into the year, now he's obviously dealt with injury, is 1,000-yard receivers for my money. Now, whether you want to call me a homer, etc., whatever you want to call me, he is good enough to have 1,000 yards in a CFL season. We saw it last year, I believe over 800 yards. And then Aiden Eberhard has been, whenever his number is called upon, he's
Yep.
catching the ball, being productive receiver, right? So excited to see this receiving core with Nathan Rourke and spreading the ball around. Any thoughts on the receivers before we get into the defense, buddy?
No, I just I really agree with everything you said. Justin McInnis, I think it was after week 5 or week 6, and he was already at like 700 yards or something like that. I don't have the exact stats in front of me, but he was already at like 700 yards, and we were talking about how he uh he might have 1,000 yards by the midpoint of the season, and we were, and all of a sudden now we're like we're at the midpoint of the season and he's only at like 800 yards or something like that. He's only had 100, 150 yards in his last few weeks. Alex Hollins has dealt with drop issues. And then Keon Hatcher, like his first game against Calgary was pretty good, but then against the Bombers last or 2 weeks ago, and then against Edmonton last week, he has also not been able to get on the same page as the quarterbacks, whether it was VA or Dolegala. So I think those three men, maybe a little sneak peek of my three keys to the game, but I think those three men really do need to get on track, much similar to what you said.
Absolutely. So it's actually pretty crazy that, well, number one, we'll go this one by one. Justin McKinnon still does lead the league in receiving yards at 834. Like you mentioned, was at 700 yards very quickly, and we were maybe getting a little bit ahead of ourselves, but still a possibility. Maybe he'll get over 1,000 at Touchdown Pacific, which we will both be in attendance for. Number 2 is actually still Tyson Philpott, who's obviously been placed on the 6-game injured list, but is still at
Devastating.
number 2, which is, pretty good, right? I think, Ontario Wilson is maybe, or yeah, I would say maybe Justin Hardy is more so the closest guy to catch him at 661 yards. But you look down the list even more, like Shamar Bridges. Who knows what's going to happen with him without Boleva Mitchell throwing the ball? Taylor Powell obviously named the starter. The next guy, number 6, is Ontario Wilson, who's been having a great season. But now with Kenny Lawler coming back, is Zach Collaros going to find his old number 1, right? And Ontario Wilson's productivity is going to drop a little bit. And then kind of from there, not a lot of guys. So I'm curious to see how long Tyson can stay in the top 5. And then maybe by the time he's back, he's still in the top 5 and is able to finish the season. I know you picked him to finish as a most outstanding Canadian. So goals still very much ahead of him at basically 800 yards. Going to miss 6 games, but if he's able to come back and have pick up where he left off, I would still imagine he's going to finish over 1,000 yards. How many touchdowns? 5 touchdowns still. So McKinnis still leading the league in touchdowns with 6 as well. But interested to see Alex Hollins, excuse me, is number 3 as well still, even though he's been quiet at 724 yards. So even though they've been quiet, still leading the league, still top 3 in receiving categories. Justin McKinnon still leading the league in 6 receiving touchdowns. So time to get back on track, fellas, and there would be no better time than this game, especially. So let's get to the defense. Not much to be said here about the defense. We talked about, weekly now. We wanted to see more from the defensive line. We won't beat that dead horse any longer. Let's get into the secondary, and let's get, first and foremost, I think you need to find a way to limit and contain Kenny Lawler's return. And I think that starts with Gary Peters being the bona fide number 1 DB that he is, number 1 corner for the Lions, and has been that for, basically a decade now, that he's, manned the boundary side of the field. I know a little bit last year with Jalen Edwards Cooper, they did their left and right sides and, stayed away from the boundary field side. But for the majority of his career, he has taken every number 1 assignment against the other team, their best receiver that they got in the boundary, and he is more often than not come out on top of a majority of those matchups. Now, where I'm curious, Blake, I'm going to actually send you a little something afterwards. It was a little media thing that they did in the summer with TSN. I don't know if you've seen they do it with like the Team Canada teams, the Team Canada hockey, soccer, all that stuff. It's the like call out your teammates type stuff
Oh
or whatever,
yeah,
like
yeah.
that media coverage. Well, it wasn't the same stuff, but it was like the same sort of atmosphere. And they were asking, Kenny Lawler to, and CFL stars to, pick their favorite away stadiums, blah blah blah. Pick, your favorite team that you like to go and beat and stuff like that. And he was talking about liking Kenny Lawler, that is, liking to go into BC Place and winning and shutting up our crowd and stuff like that. And then I know he was talking about getting excited to do our like the DBs like to do the strap celebration. So I'm gonna send it to you afterwards. I've been kind of waiting to post this and kind of throw a little bit more kindling on the fire to ignite the stakes of this game a little bit more. Um, and it was all in good fun, right? And to kind of amp up this rivalry a little bit more. But I was curious to see if some of those guys would take this as some bulletin board type material, especially in that room with a guy like RP who's very motivated and probably keeps a pulse on those type of things. So what
Mhm.
are your guys' thoughts on the secondary number 1 and then number 2 on the matchup between Gary Peters and Kenny Lawler probably tomorrow?
Yeah, so I'll start with the secondary first. I was very frustrated with them last week, I should say. I was not able to catch any of the game, and once once we lost, I didn't go back and watch the highlights, but I was able to listen to, I'd say about 3 quarters of the game. And it seemed like every time the Elks were in like 2nd and 7, 2nd and 8, the secondary was simply just too far off the receivers. They were giving them like 10 yards of separation. And then all of a sudden, Trey Ford, or once he got hurt, MBT was making a 10-yard pass. All of a sudden, it was a first down, and they dinked and dunked their way all the way down the field until eventually they were in the end zone. So it was very frustrating to me. I think the Lions will have to correct that, obviously, going into tomorrow night's game. As you said, the matchup between Gary Peters and Kenny Lawler, I'm really interested to see. I'm interested if Kenny Lawler's going to have any rust, how quickly Zach Claros goes back and and goes to him as his top target. And I hope that Gary Peters has seen that video. I haven't seen it yet. I know you said you're going to send it to me, but I hope that Gary Peters has seen that video and he wants to shut up Kenny Lawler as much as Kenny Lawler wants to shut up the BC Place faithful.
Absolutely. So, secondary, I'm very interested to see. Lastly, the Patrice Rene being slotted in at safety. I was curious to see if with the Beaulieu injury that, Adrian Green, who had been playing safety for the start of the season, was going to slide back there and maybe they were going to do some moving around with maybe Ronald Kent, maybe putting back in Jordan Perryman and then bringing Santi Evans in the slot. But they end up going with basically they're going to go with their best guys who have been playing well all year, right? They're going to go with Manny Rugamba back. They're going to go with Patrice Rene, who's been playing well. Adrian Green has been playing well and it has been thought of highly going back to the offseason. They've been talking quite
Hmm.
highly of him, so they're going to leave him at half and see what he can do out there. So I'm curious to see how they are able to perform, especially Zach's been quiet as you mentioned all year, not looking like himself. Let's hope this is not the game that he breaks out and really takes advantage of the secondary because I would be super disappointed. But we'll save that talk for post game and hope that we're talking about a nice big Lions win. Thankfully, that the secondary was able to do their job. So lastly, defensively, let's get into the linebackers. I'm curious to see if Ace Ely and Ryder Varga can have themselves a better week than last week. I thought they were, like I mentioned, out of their gaps, they were very, heads over water. Their heads were underwater for sure last week, being able to, being thrown in there like that. So um, I'm curious to see if they're able to perform against a guy like Brady Oliveira, that run game, and if Buck Pierce is, probably I would imagine watching the film, understanding that the two backup linebackers are in. If he's gonna, let's not put the ball in Zach's hands all night. Let's not put the ball in Zach's hands right away. Let's pound the rock with Brady Oliveira, who's I remind people, I know it was a quiet start to the season and people were freaking out, especially in Winnipeg, but leading the league in CFL rushing still. Gonna be over 1,000 yards still, in my money, I think the best Canadian in the CFL. If not,
Yep.
he's not very far down the list. Top three would be at the least. I would slide him for sure. But a guy that's just very productive, especially when it comes to playoff time. When the weather gets bad, they're able to run the ball and able to lean on that guy who's 225, 230 pounds, is a big time load, has a lot of weight behind him, and is able to wear on the defense all night, right? And is able to be effective like that, especially in Winnipeg. And that's where it's key that this year we play in BC and we're able to play on a fast track and really able to force their hand there with Zach Klaus maybe not being the Zach Klaus that we once knew. So interested to see how the linebackers perform, especially against a guy like Brady, who is probably really excited to perform. I know his fiance's family is from BC, and usually they're in attendance for these games. I think back to last year, like you mentioned, the game that excuse me, actually, I think back to 2022, not last year, the game that Nathan was, undefeated, was kind of being put up there as the face of the CFL, and was a little bit too quick because the Bombers came in here and kind of slapped us around a little bit. I remember Brady's family and his fiance was there then with some Oliveira jerseys and stuff like that. So I would imagine they're going to be there once again, and he'll be motivated to put on a show for them and her family. So big time eyes on them tomorrow and able to stop them. So anything in terms of the linebacker position, Blake?
No, I think other than Gary Peters, I think I want to see a turnover out of TJ Lee. That's the one thing that I want to see. He's been too quiet. I'm sure he'll be the first to admit it. He's been around just as long as Gary Peters, and coming back from his injury, I'm sure he's not super pleased about his performance. So I want to see a turnover out of TJ Lee tomorrow.
Okay, buddy. That will pretty much wrap things up. But last week I forgot. You have the option. I know you like to release it game day morning, but you have the option to give a little teaser, do whatever you want for our three keys of the game for tomorrow's matchup in week number 11 versus the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. I do not, like I mentioned, are going to do the three keys to the game anymore, but I have a few things that come to mind. So if you want to think about them quickly and whether or not you want to give all of the secrets away for tomorrow, it's up to you. But I will, quickly give a few of mine. I'm going to start first and foremost is protecting our quarterback, whoever it may be. It's going to be Nathan. Let's hope he's not going to get hurt. But if it's Chase Bryce, VA, whoever it may be, that is the number one priority tomorrow is to protect the guy with the ball under center and give him some time. I would say number two for me, and probably I would think you're leaning this way as well, is just stopping Brady Oliveira because I think that's where their offense begins, right? And is where Zach Collaros is going to be able to feel much more comfortable in that pocket, as if that defense is thinking about Brady Oliveira instead of worrying about Zach Collaros dropping back, and then they're able to work on the play action and stuff like that, suck those guys up, and then hit them deep with guys like Ontario Wilson, Kenny Lawler coming back. Stopping Brady Oliveira is going to be very, very key. And number three is just jokes aside to score more points than the other team, man. Just whether it's Sean White being back out there and continuing his Mr. Automatic ways. Whenever we are within scoring points, we have to cash in because the Bombers are an optimistic team, and we'll take advantage if you don't, come away with points. And they're a championship pedigree team, right? And kind of proven now that even though they started 0-5, there's still a little bit of life in them. And let's try to cut off the head of the stake now and not give them any more hope from here on out. And try to there's no the season starts after Labor Day type thing. Let's make them fall to what 3-7. That's a pretty tough hole to number one, catch the number 1 or 2 seeds, get back in the playoffs with Calgary kind of not really you know knowing their identity. They're losing some games or winning their games. I know they just lost for the first time at home, but they're winning enough games to keep a little bit of a distance between the Bombers now. And if we're able to drop the Bombers to one more loss, I feel like this is just another you know chip in the cap of the BC Lions and able to stay ahead of them. So Blake, I will pass things over to you, buddy. Feel free to divulge all the secrets. One of the secrets, 3 keys to the game. What are they, bud?
Yeah, I will. I will choose not to divulge all of them, but the one key that I will say, and you did prelude to it. You are 100% correct. Is the biggest key for me is the Lions need to stop Brady Oliveira. I said it before the game a couple weeks ago. They didn't do a good enough job. They did a decent job, but not a good enough job when the Bombers won 25-0. Again, Zach Claros threw for 1 touchdown pass that game. The Bombers basically beat the Lions because Sergio Castillo kicked 6 field goals. That was it. Like that was that and the fact that the Lions didn't score any points. It wasn't the necessarily the Bombers offense. Sure they did enough to drive into field goal range, but they weren't able to finish those drives. So I think if the Lions can stop Brady Oliveira, keep them to maybe 2 yards a carry, 2, 3 yards, have the Bombers in 2nd and 7, 2nd and 8 all night long, they're gonna have some success getting to Zach Claros, getting some turnovers and finally ending this 3-game losing streak.
No doubt, buddy. I'm tired of getting on the post game show to losses. It's far too long. Let's talk about a win tomorrow, which I think I'm confident. It's why they can't play the game though. At the end of the day, right? They're professionals on the other side, but I'm confident that the BC Lions are going to be able to take care of business tomorrow. I'm excited to watch. Wish I was going to be in attendance, but that's all good. Buddy, I think that's going to do it for a preview. Talked about everything, right? Offensive, defense, the matchup, injury reports, 3 keys to the game, covering all. We will see you guys tomorrow. Blake, before we get out of here, obviously like, comment, subscribe, follow us on all the social medias at Canadian Football Fanatics on Instagram, at _CF Fanatics on Twitter/X. Blake, any final thoughts for the listeners?
No, it's just been the only thing I will say very quickly is it's been way too long since we stepped into BC Place. I think once we step in tomorrow, it'll be 36 days since the last time the Lions played a home game. So it's been way too long. Let's get back into BC Place. Let's make that place loud. The upper bowl was already going to be open even before the Nathan Rourke signing. So with Nathan Rourke signing, I'd hope the lower bowl is sold out. That upper bowl is fairly full. I'd say like a quarter to half full, and let's make BC Place loud. Let's show the Bombers what us Lions fans are about. And they've been way too cocky. I've been seeing way too many people, even after that Riders game yesterday, talking. We need to shut them up once and for all.
Absolutely. Well said, buddy. So, being released on Saturday, last reminder for you guys as well. If you guys are in the BC area, get out to some junior football. And then tomorrow, get out to BC Place. If you're in BC, whether you're on Vancouver Island, whether you're in the interior, there's options for you to get to BC Place, whether it's the bus, the transit system, BC ferries, etc. I know, our man down in Victoria there will be in attendance. Coach Phil from down south.
Yeah.
Whatever you need to do, get down to BC Place. Tickets are available. Tickets are at a good price, and it's going to be a good time. So make sure you guys get down to BC Place and take in some BC Lions football. That'll do it for Blake and I's BC Lions Week 11 preview versus the Winnipeg Bluebombers, and we'll see you guys next time.